Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 Predator sequel, or more accurately, prequel, Prey, a film that is directed by Dan Trachtenberg and it stars Amber Midthunder and Dakota Beavers. Now this is set about 300 years ago in the world of the Comanche Nation. Amber Midthunder plays Naru, one of the tribal members who is desperate to prove herself as a hunter. But obviously in these times, the men of the tribe are not really having any of it. Her brother is like the top warrior in the tribe, and he is encouraging her to some degree. Now, while out hunting, she notices some signs as she sees something in the sky, which essentially is the predator being dropped off. And she starts seeing signs within the woods that something is just not right, that the other veteran hunters don't spot, and in actual fact it is a predator on the hunt that is initially kind of looking just for anything to hunt, wildlife, any threatening animal, but it soon turns its attention to her tribe and some other French hunters. Right, what are my thoughts on Prey? Well, I think it's fair to say that the Predator franchise has had a bit of a rocky ride. I'm a massive fan of the original Predator. Who isn't? But in actual fact, it's one of my favourite films of all time. It's just a flawless film in every sense of the word. And ever since that film, they've really struggled to kind of do the Predator franchise justice. There's been a couple of decent attempts. Predator 2's good. Predators is okay, but the Predator, Alien vs Predator films are, pretty average, and that's me for being fairly kind. And the last film, The Predator, initially when I first watched it, I didn't hate it that much. In fact, I think I gave it an half decent score. But I've watched it a couple of times since, and it's one of those films that gets worse every time you watch it. And if I was to score it again today, I'd probably be giving it a generous 6 out of 10. So I think a lot of people have been a bit, I don't know, not particularly hyped for this film because the Predator franchise has been on a slow decline for quite a while. However, with Dan Trachtenberg at the helm, who is pretty good at creating good tension in his movies, as 10 Cloverfield Lane proved, has actually delivered here, in my opinion, a really top quality Predator film. I thought it was thrilling, really, really enjoyable. I had a really good time with this film. It's clear he's not had the biggest budget to work with, which you can spot here and there in this film. There's a couple of dodgy CGI effects, especially with some of the wildlife. There's a scene with a bear, and it doesn't look all bad, but there is a couple of dodgy CGI effects. But I suspect they weren't prepared to throw money at this film because the Predator franchise has proven, really, that it can't really draw in massive audiences and certainly massive revenues. And because this is going straight to Hulu or in the UK Disney Plus, which is where I watched it, it's not one of those films that they've just thrown money at. And it does show, but only just, because for the most part here, what Dan Trachtenberg has delivered is a really thrilling film that at times looks really beautiful, but also at times absolutely brutal. In regards to what I would describe as its flaws, and well, I've mentioned a couple of dodgy CGI effects. I was almost expecting like the Comanche Nation actors or characters to speak in their native language, and they don't. They speak English, which I think initially was a bit of a disappointment, but I understand why they made that creative decision. I suspect it was probably taken out of the hands of Dan Trachtenberg so that it's more relatable to all audiences, I suppose. But it was a little bit disappointing. I think the film would have been probably better with a little bit of a mixture. Speaking English occasionally and speaking in their native language occasionally. Maybe a bit of a compromise would have worked better. And occasionally they do speak the language, but it's only very, very briefly. Which is odd as well, because the French characters in this film, there's a lot of French hunters in this film that are basically just there to be taken out by the Predator. but they all speak French, which is a bit odd, I suppose. You know what I mean? Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with that. I also thought it was a bit odd that while she obviously has talent as a hunter and she wants to be taken seriously as a hunter, she's spotting these signs that something's not right in the forest, that there's a fresh predator out there, if you like, something different. But these other veteran hunters just can't see it or won't see it, which I found a little bit odd. You know what I mean? They you know, they might not necessarily take her seriously as a hunter, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to deny the signs either. If she could pick them up, they should have picked it up, sort of thing, the signs. But beyond that, really, that's the end of my issues with this film. I thought it was paced brilliantly. It was a really good setup, a good introduction to the characters. And I mean, the cinematography here is really special at times as well because of the setting. And I really liked how the slow build to the predator happens, you know, because it's almost like it's on vacation initially. It's going around killing rattlesnakes and wolves, bears, all this kind of stuff. It's having a real good time taking out all this wildlife, and before it turns its attention to the humans. But I loved the design for this new predator. I mean, it looked prehistoric almost. It's like a leaner, more slimline version of the predator, but he's just so mean. And absolutely brutal. Now, you may have read or you may have heard he doesn't have like the lasers in this one. Maybe that technology hasn't been invented yet. As I said, it's 300 years, set for 300 years previously. But the other weaponry that he's got is just wonderful. I mean, absolutely brutal. He's chopping limbs off left, right, and centre. Honestly, it's absolutely brutal. Now, as I've mentioned, like the French hunters that we see here in this film are just really there as cannon fodder. But boy, what entertaining cannon fodder it is when the predator takes these French hunters out. It's just brilliant. And above all else, it for me actually made the predator a real threat again and a legitimate killing machine. It made him frightening again, the predator. And I actually thought that Naru, played by Amber Midhunter, was a really cool character, really smart and really badass. For those of you out there that worried that she wasn't going to be a good protagonist, you don't need to worry. Honestly, there's a few times watching this film I got goosebumps. It was just so good. The action, the horror, the brutality. I was completely and utterly invested in it, and I thought it was thrilling. A really good entry into the Predator franchise. Where it sits in the franchise, that's for you guys to decide. For me, it's really high up on the list. You know, I would debate whether it's, you know, potentially the second best Predator film I've seen. I just thought it was wonderful. They stripped it all back to basics, and it was a good decision that absolutely worked. We saw the origins of the Predator on Earth. We saw just how cool they can be when they go back to basics and give us a Predator that is essentially what they are hunting machines. You know, they hunt. And I think we'd almost lost sight of that these last few films that we've had. I don't know. I really, really enjoyed this film, guys. And for me, it's up there with amongst my favourite, certainly sci-fi action films of the year, and definitely worth checking out. I'm sure you will enjoy it. If you're a bit worried about checking it out because you're worried about the Predator franchise being, you know, slowly diluted, this one's a really strong entry, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. I will, of course, be back with plenty more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.